I've got a pattern here. And Wendy had specifically asked about pants. So just in the interest of camera space here, I've got little tiny pants. Really, it's simple to remember once you've been reminded that when you're sewing your pants together, you've got to match those two notches. So when you're placing your pattern down on your fabric, having those notches in exactly the same place on the print is that's going to help you. Now, it really depends a little bit on the fabric itself. What I'm going to use here today, we're working on this adorable little kind of romper. And we have, I never cut into my original pattern. We always trace all the pieces out. And anything that's important, those notches, any other dots for placement, these are all important as we get sewing. So this little tiny bodice we're working on, and you can see it has a bit of a curve. So things are going to change a little bit above here and maybe below. It's just a slight curve. And unfortunately, most clothing patterns have slight curves. There's not a lot of straight, except for maybe these two pieces here, center front, center back, and then they'll meet at the side. But there's a slight curvature here, so as well that might cause a little consternation in the pattern. But let's bring in some patterned fabric and take a look at how we're going to deal with that. So let me just take that paper pattern out, flip it over, and I'll just show you here. These are the pieces that we're working with. So this is the teeny tiniest of the patterns on here. There we go. And the other bit. So set that off to the side. And bring in some of the fabrics that someone might want to use. We've got this print. For all intents and purposes, it's a horizontal stripe, but it might appeal to some of the sewers in the audience. It might be fun to have some pajama pants or something like that out of this numbered fabric. Let me turn that around, as it is a directional. You can see just here there's a top and a bottom as well, so it's important. You can't sometimes we like to nudge our pieces together if they fit better turned in this fabric. We can't. So you might, to keep yourself straight, you might want to have a little notation on here, top, bottom, something, so that you keep the numbers in the same direction. So, and this would be even more challenging if we want to maybe keep the numbers running numerically. I might cut all of these pieces out separately. This is going to be one piece on a fold, and this will be two pieces cut individually. So if I want them to match under the arms, I might get cut in singular pieces. So This is center fold. So I might decide what numbers I like in the center here. Get that lined up straight. I might even chalk that line, and I might flip and cut this way to keep all things straight. And knowing that I've cut, let's see, just for visual sake, I'm going to put the notch on this tab, this yellow line. It's a pale, pale yellow. And then I would probably, to give myself an extra point of reference, the bottom of the notch is right between the pale yellow line and the beige line. Then this piece will be the side piece that attaches there. And interestingly enough, it nooks in pretty good. So I could tuck that right beside and cut that piece. And then I may flip this over, because I need a right and a left. Put that notch in the same place again, making sure I've got straight of grain happening here. And then I'll have this yellow line rolling all the way around the bodice. So that one's quite pale. What if we got something a little bigger, brighter, different? I brought in a couple plaids. Same thing. Going to pick placement. I could give myself a couple references with the size of this block print. The top of the notch here is sitting on the top of this gold stripe here. And the bottom point of the side seam is just tucked into the corner of that crossover. So when I cut my bodice, I would cut the same way. I would tuck, let's save a little fabric here. I can't help myself. I'm going to put the notch, pardon me, this notch is at the bottom of that gold line. That's this notch there, bottom of that gold line, and it'll put that corner really close in there. You of course will keep that nice and straight. But something this graphic too, let's just talk about the center. I would like to make a decision here. What do I want dead center of the front? It's going to matter here. Do I want the gold and the white line to split down the middle? I probably don't. I probably want the gold line. So again, we're going to have that flip over in the middle of that stripe. Oh, sorry. Got a little bit of that corner camera cutting off. Let's do that again. So center bodice here. I might like to decide in advance which one of these big stripes I want in the dead center. I would probably pick a gold stripe here. Let me take the wobble out of the bowl. And I wouldn't put it up against this gold because this would be the center of the bodice. I'd prefer a solid line. So I would probably split the gold line on my fabric. And I tend to cut pieces that need to match like this individually. So this would be a single layer of fabric. So I would find the center of this gold bar. Decide if I can give myself another reference. Maybe do I want the top of the shirt to start with the gold, the white box? Maybe I want to split the difference on the white one. Maybe split the difference on the gold one here. We've got a reference line here for the stitching of the bodice. If you've made a decision and it matters there, then that will dictate what the side seams are doing. In something like this big bold stripe, the front matters more than the sides. Not on a pair of pants, however. We'll just go back to matching the notches. And then as the patterns curve in or out, the pattern goes slightly off, but it will be evenly off and it will look balanced and matched. So something that has a center line like this, it might be in the front, might be in the back. Make some decisions here. This is kind of in the middle of that gold stripe, if I work there. So I might play with this till I find something that I can live with, that'll be happy, that gives me a few more points of reference. So I'm going to actually put this in the center of the gold line with my stitching line here. So the top of the bodice is going to be all gold along here. And so we'll have this one here. And when we flip that over, and I would flip it to cut it, I really would, so that I can make sure that those lines are all matching where I'm going to cut. And I've got the added bonus of this little notch at the top of this gold line. So when I go ahead to cut the side pieces, I'll take that notch and put it at the top of the gold line. Oops, make sure I have it on straight of grain. Now here's the problem with printed stripes. They're not necessarily straight of grain. It would be more important here to put your straight of grain line on the line so that it's cut straight according to the print. So when you have something that's woven, a woven plaid versus a printed plaid or printed stripe, the woven is to the grain line, but it's not that way in a printed one. So you have to figure out what's most important to you. This one's pretty straight visually. They aren't all, but it might be very important to you if they're not exactly straight and exactly on grain, to go with the pattern. It'll make your brain much happier and it'll be much simpler for you. So there we go. It's like a nice big chunky gold plaid, printed. I also brought in another plaid. Oops, don't throw this on the ground. So this one's woven, and it's easy to tell with the selvage. You can see, maybe not against there, but here, it's really easy to see that each little piece in here is a single string. Single strand woven. Another way to double check it if you're not sure is if you grab and pull across, you'll see that it's even. And in this, sometimes they get stretched when they're rolled on the bolt. It might appear crooked, but they're not. They are definitely, the pattern is on grain because the pattern itself creates the grain. So again, back to my eeny weeny little bodice. Which reference point do I want? Dead center, Maybe I want this wider stripe here, dead center. There's a probably not seen on screen very light lavender line there that will be the middle. And then again, move the pattern piece up and down till maybe you can find yourself an extra reference point on this notch. I'm going to go in the middle of this stripe here, and so these would be cut with that running through the middle there. Then there's actually another little piece, and this is a center fold. There's a notch for the back there. Put this on the fold, and then I might open and cut this way to keep really simply straight. But the woven plaids are lovely to work with, and they're such nice summer fabrics. Now, that sort of covers clothing, but since I have y'all here, and a good chunk of our viewers and customers here are also quilters, we're going to talk about maybe some nice big fabric that's kind of got a fun print on it, but you've got to sew two pieces together to get your back. I'm going to turn this one sideways because that will help me show you what I'm looking for. So this is the selvage running along here. And what we're looking for here is pattern repeat. And typically we don't worry about that. We cut our pieces out, we sew them together, we get a nice assortment of the overall motif in our center of the quilt. But what if this fabric is the one I want for the back? I want to keep the elephants perhaps in a row. So we have to figure out what the repeat is. And then we measure the backing. Say it's 60 inches long. We have to do 60 inches long, but we have to take into and factor the repeat, which here is these two elephants. I'm picking them just because they're a larger motif. They're the same elephant, squirrel here, monkey here, standing on a pink tree. If we decided that to measure from the very top of his little head to the very top of his head over here, that's how we come up with the repeat length. I'm just going to fold this over and use my cutting mat here. From the top of the elephant's hat to the top of the elephant's hat. 8-inch repeat. So you may need to give yourself, how about an extra 1/16 of an inch, or 16 inches, pardon me, or even a little more than that. So maybe your calculation for making your backing is 3 yards. 3 meters. Give yourself another full half. That's 20 more inches, or not quite 20, but 18 inches and 20 centimeters. That gives you some movement to get your pieces, because we might go and cut this the length we need, cut it off there, and we might need to shift everything by at least 8 inches to get the exact same repeat, so that when we sew them together, we'll have this selvage, we'll be sewing it to the other selvage, but we want to make sure that we have our elephants all lined up. So this is not the same elephant as on the other side. See, even though it's a blue elephant with a pink thing, he's actually down here, this one. So the top is here. So when we sew this together, we're going to bring that piece around and this piece around. If this was home deck fabric, they often have registration marks down the side. This does not. It has the color registration here, but there's nothing to match that on the other side. So we want to make sure that when we sew this together, we have the right picture. But you could see that, this isn't quite right. So you also might want to go all the way back here. There's this lovely graphic bird there. And you can see I can actually figure out how to sew this together. And for some of you in the room, I know this is going to make you very happy, not unlike myself. And for some of us, it's absolutely worth the effort to sort this out so that when we bring this, and what you can do is line it up and then press this. When you press this out, then you can take it and lay it on top of the other, and you have a reference line, and then you're going to sew through that. If it might be easier for you to put a chalk line on the underside here, press the top side once you've aligned your pattern and you're happy with your match. In some things, it's absolutely worth doing. You can kind of see I've got the pink tree there and the little hanging monkey all lined up. Keeps the pattern moving across. In some of the large motifs, absolutely worth doing. And of course, a little easier when you know how and what you're looking for. Let's see what else I brought. One last one. It's a super simple motif and a super simple repeat. It's just polka dots. But I love a good polka dot. The same. The repeat is short. It's only this long. From the top of that dot to that top of that dot. So it's a couple inches, I think. Yep. 2 inches. You might not have been able to see the measuring on screen. Let me do it for you. So top of the dot there, and the top of the other dot. It's even worth figuring out how to cut this and then sew this together. And remember that the polka dots you can see are offset here. So when you go to sew this together, you don't want to sew it together this way. It really draws your eye to sort of the mismatch and awkwardness of this. And you don't want to sew half dots. It really pulls your eye and it looks like an error. I know that there's sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, but if you have the time and this video in your hand and you have the opportunity to match, then you should, in my opinion, for all that's worth. So removing the selvage, you've got to give yourself some room for a seam allowance. And again, the simplest way for this is just to figure out a press under. This isn't working here, but if this was our line, what we're going to want to do here is offset. And what you can see, let me just put that up there so it's a little more obvious. What you can see up there is this little bit of fabric. That in this instance will be your waist. But that, remember, this repeat's only 2 inches. So that repeat and that waist could be more when you have a larger repeat, like an 8-inch, a 10-inch, 12-inch. In some of the really big, bold patterns, there can be many, many more inches from this motif to this motif, and you need to be able to move the fabric all the way. So that involves buying a little bit more to make that match. And in my head, you need at least 1 full motif repeat extra, maybe even 2 to be safe, because otherwise you have to buy a whole new piece of fabric. So you might have a little left over, but then, you know, perhaps you can make some accessories or use that in a scrap quilt, or trim on a shirt, make a plain colored shirt with some colorful cuffs or collar. You know, there's things we can do with those bits and pieces. Anyway, that was Ask Anne, June 14th edition. Thank you again, Wendy, for the question. I hope that this makes matching motifs a little easier for people who are sewing items, people who are making clothing, pants, shirts, skirts, dresses, whatever. Hopefully that helps. And for those of you who are quilters and you're going to use that big swath of fabric for a back and you have to piece it together, then that's something we can help you with as well. Now, let's talk about, for just 1 second, sort of postscript to matching, sewing these together, because that happens next, right? So, if you have a walking foot for your machine, I would strongly recommend that you use this to move the fabric through evenly. Way back in the day, walking feet were called even feed feet or even feed foot, which is a little awkward to say. Then they were also called, over time and space, plaid feet. And it was because once you got all that plaid matched up, you didn't want it to shift as you sewed, and we all know that shifting can happen. So using a walking foot would be, in my opinion, the best choice. If you happen to have a machine that has a built-in dual feed, this is absolutely one of the places that it would help you feed that fabric through nice and even. So happy stitching. I hope to see you next week. We'll have another edition of Ask Anne. Keep your questions coming. I'm pretty excited about some of the ones that have turned up in the last little bit. We'll get to them. Don't worry, don't panic. If you haven't had your question answered yet, don't worry, we're getting there. All right, well, it's a Friday, so have a good weekend. If you're watching this on the weekend, well, thanks. And we'll see you live again next week. Bye for now.